In this third talk, we come to the heart of the story, the actual death of Jesus. And I continue reading from verse 44. By the time of the 6th hour, darkness came over all the land. The sunlight vanished until the 9th hour. The veil of the temple was ripped down the middle. Then Jesus shouted out at the top of his voice, "Here's my spirit, Father. You can take care of it now." And with that, he died. The centurion saw what happened and praised God. "This fellow," he said, "really was in the right." All the crowds who had come together for the spectacle saw what happened, and they went away beating their breasts. Those who knew Jesus, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, remained at a distance and watched the scene. Now it really does get dark. The sky became dark. Literally, there was a supernatural darkness which seemed to overwhelm the situation. And we may well find ourselves asking why. I guess the coronavirus is making many of us do that. Why does God allow such things to happen? I'm not going to suggest any trite answer to that. But sometimes we do need to know that we're not in control. This life isn't all that there is. As Christians, we look forward to something greater, what Jesus calls paradise. All four Gospels give us different glimpses of what happened on that first Good Friday. Matthew, Mark, and Luke note that Jesus cried out with a loud voice. Most extraordinary, given how weak Jesus must have been at that moment. But these last words were so important that they had to be shouted out. The world needed to hear them. Luke records that he said, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." Mark tells us significantly that he cried out in Aramaic, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani." Matthew in his gospel just changes the word slightly, changing it to Hebrew, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. And Matthew, who was probably basing what he said on Mark's gospel, by so doing was just saying, look, this is a quote. It's a quote from Psalm 22, a psalm which includes the striking words, verses 16 to 18, "A band of evil men have encircled me. They have pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing." It sounds like Good Friday, doesn't it? A psalm that goes on to speak of new life. But that's another story. You see, that suffering was not the end. John points out that Jesus also used the phrase, "It is finished." The work he had come to do had been achieved, had been finished, had been completed. The curtain, symbolically separating mere humans from the presence of God in the temple, was torn in two. Matthew and Mark add the detail from top to bottom. It was the act of God. Libraries of books have been written about the significance of Jesus' death. The Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:3, "Christ died for our sins." The Apostle Peter wrote in 1 Peter 2 verse 24, "Jesus himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. And the Apostle John wrote in 1 John 4 verse 10, this is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice, which means bringing God and us together, an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Luke ends a section by observing in verse 49, all those who knew him, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance, watching these things. There's a slight sense of cowardice there. You know, they were standing back, they were keeping out of the way. I wonder, what about us? How would we have felt if we had been there? How would we have behaved? Join with me again in the response on the order of service. My peace I gave, which the world cannot give, and washed your feet as a sign of my love. But you draw the sword to strike in my name and seek high places in my kingdom. I offered you my body and blood, but you scatter and deny and abandon me. Holy God, holy and strong, holy and immortal, have mercy on me.